What's up, guys? We finally got our full in-depth review of the new Parrot Anafi drone, and I gotta say there were quite a few surprises, so stick around as we break it down. Real quick, let me give you a little rundown of what we're going over. First, we're going to take a look at design and build quality. Next, we'll open up the mobile app and see what that's all about. Then we'll actually put the drone up into the air, see what it's like flying it around using all the different features and controls. And then we're going to wrap things up by putting it side by side against some of its competitors in an image quality comparison. So let's do a quick unboxing and then we'll jump right into design and build quality. Now I want to be honest and give you fair warning. When it comes to build quality and design, I do feel like the Anafi kind of lags behind the competition. But hang in there and keep watching because as you see later in the review, it does have some other very redemptive features. Under the lid, you're presented with the controller, some spare propellers, and a hardshell case carrying the drone itself. Compared to the Mavic Air, it's quite a bit longer, but also a lot more narrow. Unfolding the legs is a quick and easy process and can be done in a matter of seconds. The battery is easy to remove and replace. The microSD card sits beneath the battery, so you have to power down your drone if you need to swap cards. On the camera is a tiny little lens cap, which I have a 100% chance of losing in the next few days. I do like that it has USB charging, which means that if I have a USB port on my car, I can charge it on the go. When it comes to replacing your propellers, it's a little bit cumbersome to say the least. Each propeller is held in place by a tiny little screw which threads directly into the rotor disc, which also spins freely. So you have to hold the rotor firmly with your other hand and hope to God you don't drop that screw in some tall grass, because you don't get any spares of those. You also have to be very careful to replace the propeller blades with the correct propeller, otherwise your drone might decide to do a faceplant. But don't worry, there's some hieroglyphics you can decipher as well as some microscopic markings to help you get it right. As reference, here's what it takes to replace the propellers on the Mavic Air. So yeah. As far as build quality, the Anafi seems a little bit flimsy and cheap, especially when you compare it to something like the Mavic Air, which is in the same price bracket. It wobbles around and the legs are pretty easy to twist. Now this could be a good thing, because it might be more likely to bend than snap, but even when you tap it with your fingers, you don't get an overwhelming sense of sturdiness. When it comes to the controller, the buttons are nice and tactile, the joysticks feel pretty well made with nice tension on them. I definitely appreciate how simple it is, but there are a few things to note. First of all, it's a little chunky. I think that's a good word. It kind of looks like one of those old game controllers, so in that sense, it's a bit uninspiring. But that aside, the levers on the back feel nice too. They have some nice tension to them as well, but I wish they were side to side rather than up and down. It just seems like a more natural way to move your finger. Now granted, I might have somewhat large hands, but when I hold the controller, my ring finger and pinky feel a bit homeless. But I guess you have to make some sacrifices to keep the size down. Lastly, the clamp for your mobile device has a good amount of pressure, so you won't feel like it's about to fall out. However, when you do decide to take your phone out, be sure that the drone isn't in the air, because this can happen. And yeah, it did happen. Notwithstanding a few bugs here and there, the Parrot Mobile App for the Anafi is pretty pleasant to use. I'd even venture to say I like it more than the DJI Go app. It's simple and intuitive. Once you create your account, you're brought to this home screen where you can navigate to your media, purchase additional drone features, or just start flying. The flight interface is nicely laid out. Each setting displayed on the screen can be tapped and changed. I actually like this better than what you get from the DJI app, which shows you your settings, but you have to open a tab somewhere else to access them. Telemetry is easy to view and keep track of, and you can easily switch map orientation from aircraft to controller, which can be helpful for getting your bearings. Changing your camera settings takes a little bit of searching. You have to open up the record settings in order to view the camera controls. From here, it's easy to set your shutter speed, ISO, white balance, and exposure compensation. One small bummer though is that you can't set a custom Kelvin. Now, like I said before, there are a few bugs that I won't go over too much because I know they can be ironed out once the app goes through some updates. One of them is the HDR video mode, which locks your exposure to auto even if you switch to photo mode. You have to go back into video mode to switch it off. Some of the buttons in the store don't really work, and it's kind of a bummer that the Follow Me feature requires an additional purchase. The last thing I wanted to make sure I cover is the media interface. Once you record your content, if you want to view anything on your device, you have to select it from a grid of thumbnails and download it locally. While you're in this menu, you're going to want to be very careful because the Erase All button does not have a confirmation pop-up. If you accidentally tap it, all your media will be deleted instantly, and as far as I can tell, there's no way to get it back. Taking off is very easy with a tap of the screen. Without touching the controls, it does tend to drift a little when compared to the Mavic Air. When it comes to noise, it's pretty quiet. It's actually a little less invasive than the Mavic Air. In the real world, flying the Anafi is a pleasant experience. Movement is smooth in cinema mode, and when you need a bit more speed, you can zip around pretty quick in sport mode. For its size, it's pretty stable in the air, no real complaints. The Anafi has mechanical stabilization for the roll axis as well as the tilt axis. However, the horizontal or pan axis is stabilized digitally. I did have some reservations at first, but as far as I can tell, it works pretty well. In video mode, the zoom feature is very cool. It eases in and out smoothly, and you can create some very dramatic shots. There is a limit on the speed, but for my taste in cinematography, I don't think I'd need it to be faster. The tilting is also nice and smooth, and the ability to tilt the camera a full 180 degrees makes for some pretty cool possibilities. Again though, I wish the levers were oriented left to right. I still found it a little difficult to control pressure to create smooth camera moves. The cameraman mode was a lot of fun and worked very well. Just trace your subject with your finger and the Anafi will track it wherever it goes. From there, you can fly around freely and the camera will stay locked on the subject. I was very impressed with this feature. At one point, I even flew directly overhead and it still managed to track me. Changing directions didn't seem to give the Anafi any problems. Unfortunately, like I said before, I wasn't able to test out the Follow Me feature because for whatever reason, the buy button wouldn't work. But if you guys check out this video by Captain Drone, he did some great testing of the Follow Me feature. One last thing I noticed was that there is a pretty long delay after hitting the shutter button and when the photo is actually taken. I'm not sure if this is a bug, but it was pretty annoying. So real quick, just to give you an idea of what to expect, first we're just going to test out image quality at 4K and 1080p. Then we'll take a look at high frame rates as well as slow motion capabilities. Next we'll compare the different log profiles as well as the HDR video mode of the Anafi. We'll do a quick high ISO test, and then we'll finish things up by testing out the Anafi's unique zoom feature. In 4K, the Anafi seems to retain a lot more detail than the Mavic Air. The Mavic Pro comes close, but DJI adds quite a bit of sharpening to the Pro by default, which is a little distracting. This is a recurring theme for the Mavic Pro for all the other tests as well. Dynamic range for all of the drones seem to be similar in normal shooting modes. At 1080, I actually think the DJI siblings edge out the Anafi, especially when you take a look at the darker side of the building under construction. Here's the high frame rate test at 60p. Here it's a bit of a toss-up. The Anafi seems to have some sharpening added, the Mavic Air seems soft but has a fair amount of detail, and the Mavic Pro is kind of a combination of the other two. Now we have the slow-mo comparison. The Anafi definitely has more detail and sharpness than the other two, but maxes out at 60 FPS. You won't be getting any true slow motion footage from the Anafi. The Mavic Air, while it shoots in 120 frames per second, it's very soft in comparison. The Mavic Pro is similar to the Anafi, but if you look at the edge of the container, there seems to be a slight loss in resolution. Before we check out the different log profiles, if you guys appreciate videos like this, please hit the subscribe button so we can keep you up to date with reviews and comparison videos of all the latest photo and video gear. It also goes a long way in helping us keep this channel going, so thank you. Parrot's P-Log definitely stands out above the profiles available for the Mavic Air and Mavic Pro. It's just as easy to grade, and at first glance, I did notice a little bit more detail in the shadows. But when you take a closer look, there's a huge difference. I'm guessing it has something to do with the type of compression, but both the DJI drones got very muddy and lost a lot of detail, especially in the shadows. The Cinelike D footage on the Mavic Air is soft, and D-Log on the Mavic Pro starts to look like a watercolor painting. Meanwhile, the Anafi footage looks absolutely amazing in comparison. It definitely seems like there's a dynamic range advantage for the Parrot as well. HDR video quality was also a huge surprise. The amount of dynamic range and shadow detail you get is pretty incredible for a $700 camera, and let's not forget, it can fly. Here's a quick ISO test at ISO 800. It looks like the Anafi has some built-in noise reduction, which actually does a pretty darn good job at retaining detail, at least in the midtones and highlights. The Mavic Air seems to have some noise reduction as well, but pixels are still dancing all over the place. The Mavic Pro is a complete mess, with probably some combination of noise reduction and sharpening. Finally, here's a little test of the Anafi's zoom function when compared to a digital zoom in post-processing. This to me was very impressive. I expected a noticeable drop in image quality, and there is some, but after looking at the footage, it's perfectly usable. When you compare it to a digital zoom in post, it's a huge difference. When it comes to photo quality, I decided to swap out the Mavic Pro for a Phantom 4 Pro because, let's face it, the Anafi completely dwarfs the Mavic Air when it comes to resolution. And yes, I know the Phantom 4 Pro has a 1-inch sensor, but let's just see how it holds up. Now keep in mind, these are not scientific tests, so don't shoot me if you get different results. So first, let's take a look at all three images taken at the exact same exposure values. Next, I cranked up the exposure to +4 to see what the shadows would do. It's no surprise that the 1-inch sensor on the Phantom gave us the cleanest image. The Mavic Air shows a bit of tonal noise, and the Anafi reveals a ton of color noise. Next, I dragged the highlights tab all the way to -100. To my surprise, it looked like the Anafi actually recovered the most highlights in the clouds, while the Phantom seemed to recover the least. Lastly, while leaving the highlights at -100, I cranked the shadows all the way up to +100. Here, the Anafi showed a lot of color noise, as well as a significant amount of blue chromatic aberrations. The Mavic Air showed a fair amount of tonal noise, as well as some magenta chromatic aberrations, and quite a bit of magenta discoloration in the corners. The Phantom obviously did the best, with almost no noise and a tiny magenta tinge on the edges. So that is our full in-depth review of the Parrot Anafi. To summarize, the things that I really liked: number 1, image quality. That was probably the biggest surprise, it blew me away. Number 2 was the usability factor. It's pretty easy to use and nice and intuitive. Number 3 is definitely the zoom and tilt features. You can make some pretty dynamic shots, and I wish I had that on my Phantom 4 Pro. Number 4 was the app experience. I like being able to tap on the screen and just change the settings right there. I hope DJI adopts that at some point. Number 5 is value. At under $700, you're getting quite a bit for your money. Some things I wasn't too hot on were the propeller blades. They felt pretty cheap, and changing them out was such a pain in the butt, especially when you compare it to the Mavic Air system. Number 2 is probably design and build quality. I still think it feels a little bit cheap and flimsy. The design of the drone is alright, but the controller doesn't exactly make you look like you're operating a state-of-the-art aerial imaging device. And number 3, I gotta throw this in there, I shoot HD quality a lot, so finding out that the 1080 image quality was mediocre at best was a little bit of a disappointment, especially when you look at how good the 4K footage was. So if you're looking for a drone in the $700-800 range, go ahead and prioritize what's most important to you. If it's image quality and you really like that zoom feature as well as the tilt, I'd say go ahead and pick up a Parrot Anafi. On the other hand, DJI does have the most experience, and it really shows in their design and build quality. They've also been the market leader for many, many years, which has given them a chance to prove that they're reliable, which is not something you want to take lightly. I've put links in the description below to the Anafi as well as the other drones mentioned in this video. If you guys appreciate what we're doing here, please hit the subscribe button or throw us a like or a comment. As always, my name is Kaviko with Ninth App Studio, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Shoots!